Lucas woke early one Saturday morning, the soft light of dawn painting gentle colors across his bedroom walls. He sat up and reached for the small glass vase on his bedside table. The sunflower inside still stood tall, its yellow petals bright. Against the clear water, he smiled as he touched a petal. It reminded him of Emily's kindness and how a single flower changed everything for him. Over the past year, Lucas and Emily had grown close. They met often for coffee, art shows, and quiet walks in the park. Emily showed him her favorite painting spots, and Lucas shared his short stories with her. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Lucas no longer felt alone or different. He felt seen and valued. That morning, Lucas dressed carefully. He chose a crisp, light blue shirt and dark trousers, clothes that made him feel confident. He brushed his hair and wheeled himself to the living room, where his father, Edward, already sat with a cup of tea. Edward's face was calm but bright, as if he held a secret. "Good morning, son," Edward said, standing to hug him. "Are you ready for today?" Lucas nodded, curious. "Are we going somewhere special?" Edward smiled. "I've arranged a small dinner tonight to celebrate you and Emily. Just a few friends and some good food." Lucas's eyes lit up. "That sounds wonderful." He thought of Emily's warm laugh and her shy smile. "Thank you, Dad." All day, Lucas helped his father prepare. They chose Emily's favorite flowers, sunflowers, and arranged them in simple vases on the dining table. Edward picked dishes that Lucas knew Emily liked: fresh salad, grilled fish, roasted vegetables, and a light lemon cake for dessert. The house smelled of herbs and citrus as the kitchen filled with warmth. By late afternoon, Edward went upstairs to change into his suit. Lucas wheeled himself into the dining room. The table was set with white plates, silver cutlery, and small candles that flickered in the soft light. The sunflower stood proudly at the center. Lucas ran his fingers along the tablecloth, feeling its soft texture. He felt both excitement and nervousness. He hoped Emily would like the evening. A knock came at the front door. Lucas's heart quickened. He wheeled himself to the entrance and opened it. There stood Emily, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and wearing a gentle smile. Her hair glowed in the late afternoon light. "Hi, Lucas," she said softly. "You invited me?" Lucas beamed. "Yes. My dad wanted to celebrate how far we've come." Stepped aside so Emily could enter. She set the wildflowers on a small side table and looked around the room with wonder. "It's beautiful," she said. Edward appeared from the hallway, opening his arms. "Emily, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us." Emily smiled warmly as she shook Edward's hand. "Thank you for inviting me." She turned to Lucas. "You two did all this?" Lucas laughed. "We had help, but yes," he motioned toward the table. "Please, have a seat." They ate together by candlelight. Edward kept the conversation light, sharing stories from his travels and asking Emily about her art projects. Lucas listened and laughed along. The dinner felt like a warm embrace. Emily's eyes often met Lucas's, and he knew she was proud of him. He felt an inner joy he had never known before. After the main course, Edward brought out the lemon cake. It was small, but perfectly decorated with a single sunflower petal on top. "Ah!" Emily's eyes widened. "Is that for me?" she asked. Edward nodded. "It's to celebrate how you bring sunshine into our lives." He winked at Lucas, who felt his face flush with happiness. Emily looked touched. "Thank you," she whispered. She took a forkful of cake, and her eyes closed as she savored the taste. Lucas watched her, feeling a warmth spread through him. After dessert, Edward stood and cleared his throat. The room quieted. Lucas felt his heartbeat in his ears. His father held a small envelope in his hand. "I have something to share," Edward began. "Lucas and I have kept this private, but tonight I want to be honest." He looked at Lucas and then at Emily. "I am a businessman with many companies. Lucas and I have a comfortable life because of my work. I did not tell you this before because I wanted you to know Lucas for who he is, not for what we have." Emily's eyes grew wide. but she did not look away. She placed her hand on Lucas's. "Thank you for telling me," she said gently. Edward smiled and opened the envelope. Inside was a photo from the night of the first dinner, picture of Lucas and Emily beneath the lanterns, Emily offering the sunflower. Edward passed the photo to Emily. "I'd like you to have this," he said. "Reminds us that one simple act of kindness can change a life." Emily held the photo carefully. She felt tears gather in her eyes. I don't know what to say. She looked at Lucas, whose eyes glistened. "I brought you flowers that night because I wanted to show you someone cared. But your father's words, they mean so much." Lucas squeezed her hand. "You mattered more than any money. You saw me as me." Emily smiled through her tears. "You saw me too." Edward watched them with pride. He saw Lucas's face, free from doubt. Saw Emily's sincere affection. I knew his promise had been fulfilled. They spent the rest of the evening talking about their dreams. Lucas spoke of writing a novel one day, and Emily shared her plans for an art show. Edward listened, offering gentle encouragement but letting their voices carry the room. Outside, the night was still, filled with the sounds of crickets and a soft breeze rustling through the trees. As the evening wound down, Emily stood and hugged Lucas. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice full of warmth. "Thank you for sharing this with me?" Lucas closed his eyes in the hug and felt complete. "Thank you for being here," he replied. Edward watched the moment, then whispered to Lucas, "I'm proud of you." Lucas opened his eyes and smiled at his father. He felt gratitude for the man who gave him life, love, and this chance. After Emily left, Lucas and Edward sat together on the porch steps. The moon shone brightly overhead. Lucas held the photo and the sunflower petal from the cake. He looked at his father. "I never thought I'd feel this happy," he said softly. Edward wrapped an arm around his son. "You deserve all the happiness in the world," he said. "You showed me that kindness matters more than anything else." Lucas leaned his head on his father's shoulder. He thought of the journey they had shared from the first promise to this quiet night under the stars. He knew life would have challenges ahead, but he also knew he would never face them alone. The sunflower in the vase behind them seemed to glow in the moonlight. Lucas understood that love, respect, and small acts of kindness could light even the darkest paths. He felt hope and joy fill his heart as he looked at the flower and then at his father. In the stillness of that night, Lucas and Edward shared a silent promise: to always seek kindness, to always see the person behind every face, and to hold hope close, like a sunflower held in gentle hands. And as the night breeze whispered through the garden, Lucas felt a smile blossom inside him. Knowing that his life had been forever changed by one simple flower and by the love that had let it shine. The evening air was cool when Maria quietly brought the check to the table and slipped it into a small folder. The soft glow of lanterns wrapped the garden in a gentle light. Lucas sat still, his hands resting on the sunflower stem. Emily smiled at him, and he felt a warm calm wash over him. The other women at the table were gathering their things, chatting in low voices. The music drifted softly, like a gentle memory. Lucas realized he did not want the night to end, but he also felt peaceful knowing something special had begun. Edward rose from his hiding place. Behind a vine-covered column, he walked across the garden, giving each young woman a firm handshake and a sincere thank you for coming. To Anna, he spoke of her thoughtfulness with the chocolate. To Sophie, he praised her music gift. To Priya, he admired her artistic sketch. To Daniela, he thanked her for her caring heart. Each woman smiled politely, but Edward could see their eyes did not linger. Then he turned toward Lucas and Emily, where the flower still sat. In that moment, he knew which meeting had truly mattered. Emily reached out and gently touched Lucas's hand. Her fingers were light, but the touch carried something deep: respect, kindness, and hope. "I had a wonderful time talking with you," she said softly. "Thank you for letting me get to know you." Lucas looked at her, his eyes wide. He felt as though no one had ever spoken those words with such honesty. He squeezed her hand back, and a small smile curved his lips. "Thank you," he replied. "I'm glad you came tonight." The group rose, and the soft hum of goodbyes filled the air. Lucas stood from his wheelchair and watched everyone walk toward the exit. Emily stayed by his side until the others were a few steps away. Then she leaned close and whispered, "I hope we can do this again." She gave his hand one last gentle squeeze and turned to leave. Lucas felt a small ache as she walked away, but he also felt excitement bloom in his chest. Edward wheeled Lucas through the archway of ivy and into the night.
Ow.
The street lamps cast long shadows on the path, and the cool breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine from the garden behind them. Lucas held the sunflower in one hand, and the other rested lightly on the wheel. "Dad," he said after a moment that was more than I ever expected. Edward smiled, his eyes soft with pride. "I knew you'd find someone who saw you," he said. They reached the car, and Edward helped Lucas settle into the passenger seat. The sunflower stood tall in a small glass vase that Edward had placed on the console. Lucas watched as his father closed the door and slid behind the wheel. The engine purred as they drove home in silence, each thinking of the night's gentle moments back at home. Edward carried Lucas's wheelchair up the ramp and into the living room. Lucas set the vase on the small side table and arranged the sunflower so it faced the window. The yellow petals seemed to glow even without the sun. Lucas ran his fingers along the stem and looked at each petal with wonder. He felt a quiet joy, as if the flower held all the hope he had ever needed. That night, Lucas sat at his desk beside the window. He opened a small notebook and wrote down everything he could remember. Emily's soft voice, her story about her brother, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. He wrote that she had not once looked at his wheelchair. She had looked at him. He wrote until his hand felt tired, but his heart felt full. Edward paused outside Lucas's room door and watched him right by the soft glow of a lamp. He saw a genuine smile on his son's face and felt it in his own chest. He remembered his promise to give Lucas a chance, a simple moment of kindness, and now he saw the promise come true. He closed the door quietly, leaving Lucas to his thoughts. The next morning, Lucas woke to soft light filtering through the curtains. He sat up and stared at the sunflower on the table. It still stood bright and strong. He touched a petal and smiled. The memory of Emily's touch came back to him, and he felt a warmth in his chest. He wondered if she was thinking of him too. Edward knocked and entered, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He handed one to Lucas, who accepted it gratefully. They sat together on the couch, the sunflower between them. Lucas took a sip and sighed with contentment. "Dad," he said, "do you think Emily will call?" Edward set down his mug and nodded. "I think she will," he said. "She seemed to enjoy tonight as much as you did." Lucas closed his eyes and took another sip, savoring the sweet warmth. After breakfast, Lucas rolled to his desk and picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen as he thought of what to text. He wanted to be honest and kind, just like Emily had been. Finally, he wrote, "Thank you for last night. Loved talking with you. Would you like to meet again?" He stared at the message for a moment, then tapped send. His heart raced as the message flew across the screen. Edward watched his son and felt pride. He knew Lucas was taking a brave step, not just in sending the text, but in opening his heart again. He placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "No matter what happens," he said softly, "you are worth kindness and respect." Lucas looked up, and his eyes shone. "I know," he said. "Thank you." That afternoon, Lucas paced the living room, the phone in his hand. He and Edward sat side by side on the couch, waiting. Every time the phone buzzed, Lucas's heart jumped. But each time, it was just a notification, till late afternoon, when the phone lit up with a new message from an unknown number. Lucas stared at the screen. It read, "I had a lovely time, too. I'd love to see you again. How about coffee tomorrow?" Lucas let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. He showed the message to his father, who clapped his hands quietly in celebration. That night, Lucas placed the sunflower by his bedside. He lay down, feeling a soft joy in his heart. He thought of Emily's smile, her stories, and the promise. of tomorrow. As sleep began to pull him under, he whispered, "Thank you, Dad," and closed his eyes on a world that suddenly felt full of hope and light. Emily slid into the empty chair with a gentle smile. She looked at Lucas and nodded as if she understood every unspoken word. The sunflower still sat between them, bright and warm. Lucas felt a flutter in his chest. For a moment, the other four women and their gifts drifted into the background like clouds blown away by a breeze. It was just Lucas and Emily now. She asked him about his day, her voice soft and caring. Lucas realized he could speak freely with her. He did not have to worry about awkward silences or pity in her tone. Her eyes met his, steady and kind, and he felt safe. The hum of the restaurant, the glow of the lanterns, and the slow strum of guitar music all faded away. In that stillness, Lucas and Emily began to talk. Emily started by telling Lucas about her late younger brother Mark. She spoke in simple words, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Mark was 2 years younger than me," she said. "He used a wheelchair after he got sick. We grew very close. He loved stories and jokes. We would sit by the river and watch the ducks." Lucas listened, his heart trading places with her. Memories. Emily's eyes grew bright and wet as she remembered her brother's laughter. "He taught me to see people for who they are," she said, "not for what they can or cannot do." Lucas felt his own sadness rise and blend with her words. He squeezed the sunflower gently, feeling its smooth stem beneath his fingers. Emily's story made him feel less alone. Lucas took a deep breath and began to tell his story. He spoke of the accident when he was a child, told Emily how the world changed in a single moment, how sunlight and laughter gave way to hospital rooms and quiet fears. His voice shook at first, but he kept going. He told her about his first days in the wheelchair, how he struggled to find joy again. Emily reached out and touched his arm lightly, her hand cool on his skin. She did not pity him. She simply cared. Lucas felt a warmth spread through his chest, like the first rays of sun after a storm. He talked about his love for music, how a single song could make him feel alive. He spoke of books he read, stories that carried him away. Emily nodded, encouraging him to go on. When he finished, he met her eyes and found only respect there. They discovered they shared a favorite song by the same singer. Emily hummed a line, and Lucas joined in softly. The notes rose and fell between them, a private melody only they could hear. They spoke of novels that moved them, characters they wished they could meet. Emily described paintings she made of city streets at dawn, where colors spilled across the sky like spilled paint. Lucas imagined those scenes, bright and hopeful. He felt as if he could step right into her art. He laughed as Emily described a time she painted her own cat to look like a superhero, complete with a tiny cape. His laugh was clear, free from any echo of doubt or fear. It was the pure sound of joy. For the first time in a long time, Lucas forgot about his wheelchair. Emily pulled out her phone and showed Lucas's photos of her paintings. The screen glowed. In the soft light, she scrolled and talked about each piece. She spoke of the joy she felt when the paint touched the canvas, how she used color to express feelings she could not put into words. Lucas admired each image. He leaned forward, studying brushstrokes and shapes. "You have real talent," he said. Emily's cheeks warmed, and she looked down. "Thank you," she whispered. "I paint because it helps me breathe."
How, Lucas?
Nodded, he understood. He had his own way to breathe through words and music, but her art was like a voice he could see. He felt proud for her. They made promises to share songs and poems someday. Around them, the restaurant's lights dimmed a bit, and other diners rose from their tables to leave. The four women who had arrived earlier watched Lucas and Emily with gentle smiles. They sipped their drinks but did not interrupt the two new friends. Maria stood near the exit, ready to support but mostly content to let the evening flow. Sat at his corner table, his eyes shining as he watched. He saw Lucas lean closer to Emily, their faces soft and open. He saw Emily's hand rest lightly on the back of his wheelchair, a touch full of warmth. Edward's chest felt full. He remembered his promise, to give Lucas a chance. Now he saw that the chance had blossomed into a real moment of connection. The waiter came by and offered dessert menus, but Lucas waved it away. He did not want a sweet dish. Already felt sweetness in his heart. Emily asked if he would like another drink of water, smiled and said yes. They spoke quietly about plans for dessert, maybe ice cream at a nearby cafe someday. They laughed at the idea of chasing each other around a park. Lucas realized that Emily did not see his body first. She saw his smile, his eyes, his stories. He felt safe imagining a future where he could laugh with her under the stars, where she would know him as he truly was. As the evening wound down, Emily asked Lucas if he liked surprises. Lucas smiled and said he did. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a small notepad and pen. She wrote something and handed it to him. On the page, in neat letters, was the name and number of her favorite art supply shop and a note that said, "Text me anytime. I'd love to paint together." Lucas's heart leaped. He looked at Emily, grateful and a little shy. She waved off his thanks. "I want to see your writing someday," she said. Lucas nodded. He realized he had found someone who believed in him. The restaurant began to empty. Maria appeared and gently reminded the group that it was time to leave. For earlier guests stood and said goodnight, each offering a quiet farewell. Lucas thanked them and told them he hoped they found someone special too. As the group walked toward the exit, Lucas turned back to Emily. She gave him a warm hug, careful not to spill his drink. He felt her arms around him and knew it was more than kindness. It was friendship, respect, and perhaps the start of something more. Edward wheeled Lucas out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. The sky was clear and stars shone like tiny lanterns. Lucas held the sunflower close. He looked at his father, eyes shining. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything." Edward smiled, his own eyes moist. "You did great," he said. "I'm proud of you." Lucas thought of Emily's words, her gentle voice, her honest gaze. He knew this night would stay with him forever. The simple act of a flower had opened a door. Now he felt ready to step through it. Edward woke before dawn the morning after his promise to Lucas. The sky was still dark outside his large windows. But his mind was already racing, could not rest until he knew he had done everything he could for his son. He showered, dressed in a simple suit, and drove his black sedan to the headquarters of a small charity he trusted. The office was quiet when he arrived, and he found Maria at her desk sipping coffee and reviewing a stack of papers. Her calm smile greeted him like a beacon of hope. "Maria," Edward said softly, "thank you for seeing me so early." He took a seat across from her. She knew his son's story, but she did not know the full reason for this visit. He took a deep breath. "I want to give Lucas a chance to meet some kind people. He's never been on a date. I'd like to arrange a small private dinner, just 5 young women who are open-hearted. I don't want them to know about our money or his wheelchair. Let them come to know him for who he is." Maria nodded, her eyes thoughtful. She tapped her pen on the table. "I understand, Edward. We can do this carefully. I have a few young women in mind, students, volunteers, artists each, known for their kindness. I'll speak with them individually. I'll tell them only that they will meet a respectful, intelligent man in a wheelchair. No mention of his background or wealth." She paused. "I'll make sure the setting is gentle and calm. A small garden restaurant, soft lights, quiet music." He felt a weight lift from his chest. "Thank you, Maria. I trust you completely. Please let me know if any of them decline. I want only people who truly want to be there." He handed her a small list of names he had compiled: friends of friends, volunteers at community centers, young women who had shown compassion in the past. Maria smiled and opened her laptop. "I'll reach out today. Keep everything private. You can stay out of it once we begin." Edward nodded and left, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and hope. Later that afternoon, Maria had called back. 4 of the 5 women had agreed. Their names were Anna, a graduate student who worked with animal shelters; Sophie, a music teacher who tutored children; Priya, an artist who painted murals in the city; and Daniela, a nurse who volunteered at free clinics. The 5th, Emily, had reserved her reply until she met the others. Maria assured Edward that Emily would decide soon. Over the next week, Edward tried to act normally at home, but his mind kept drifting to the dinner. He watched Lucas as he studied books by the window or listened to music with headphones. Lucas would sometimes glance at his father, curious about his mood. Edward had to remind himself not to treat this like a business deal. It was a father's hope for his son to see him free of doubt, if only for one evening. On the morning of the dinner, Edward brought Lucas's breakfast in his room. He placed pancakes and fruit on the tray. Lucas looked up with a hesitant smile. "Happy birthday," Edward said, using the day as a small gift. "I have a surprise." Luke studied his father's face. "Is it another model car?" he teased softly, knowing his dad's love for giving toys and gadgets. Edward shook his head. "No, something better. Tonight, you'll have dinner with 5 interesting young women. I want you to just enjoy talking, no pressure." He kept his voice steady, though his heart was pounding. Lucas's fork paused. "Mid-air? 5 girls? A blind date? Dad, why would you do that?" Edward set down the tray. He sat beside Lucas's wheelchair.
Buzz.
"Because you deserve a chance. Not pity. Just a chance to meet people who see you, not the wheelchair." Lucas bit his lip. He wanted to believe his father, but worry shadowed his eyes. "What if they feel weird? What if they stare or feel sorry for me?" "You won't be alone," Edward said gently. "Maria will be there. I'll wait nearby. Just be yourself. That is enough." He squeezed Lucas's hand before leaving to let him finish breakfast. As sunlight filled the room, Lucas thought about the evening. He wondered what 5 strangers would think of him. He worried he would say something clumsy or that they would treat him with too much sympathy. He decided to prepare by picking ideas of what to talk about: his favorite books, the songs he liked, his dream to write a short story one day. He wanted to show them who he was, beyond the wheelchair. By late afternoon, Lucas was dressed in a crisp shirt and dark jeans. His hair was combed, and his jacket lay folded on the chair beside him. He felt a flutter of nerves, but also a small spark of excitement. Friendlier face might change everything. Edward arrived at the Garden restaurant half an hour early. The venue was a hidden gym, ivy-covered walls. Lanterns hanging from tree branches, wooden tables spaced apart for privacy. Soft piano music played in the background. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine. Maria greeted Edward with a nod. She had arranged a long table at the center, with 5 chairs facing Lucas's wheelchair. "Everyone is on time," she whispered, "except Emily. She said she might be a few minutes late, but she's coming." Edward nodded and took a seat at a corner table. He would watch quietly, ready to step in only if Lucas needed him. The first woman arrived. Anna stepped forward, smiling warmly. She offered Lucas a friendly wave and a small box of his favorite dark chocolate. Maria had whispered his preference. Lucas beamed as he accepted the gift. The chocolate was thoughtful, but Anna's eyes flicked to the wheelchair as she handed it over. Polite, but a hint of discomfort lingered in her smile. Soon after, Sophie arrived with a guitar-shaped keychain. She explained that music helped her connect with others. She strummed a brief chord and told Lucas she thought music could heal. Lucas thanked her and smiled, but the gift felt like a token, nice, but not personal. Priya came next, carrying a tiny sketchbook. She introduced herself with a gentle tone and said she had drawn the restaurant's garden. She handed the sketch to Lucas, who admired the delicate lines. It was creative, but he sensed Priya's focus on the setting rather than on him. Was the 4th. She approached with a friendly nod and placed a small jar of honey on the table, saying it was for her morning tea. Her eyes shone with kindness. Lucas thought about offering her a taste, but he hesitated when Daniela's gaze dropped to his hands on the wheelchair's controls. By now, Lucas felt polite fatigue. He smiled, answered questions, and tried to show interest in each gift. In each encounter, he felt the barrier of their polite distance. They were kind, but he felt like a project they were helping rather than a person they wished to know. He looked at the empty seat at the end of the table. Only one girl remained. He wondered if she would bring anything special. The evening light shifted to gold as the sun set. The soft piano gave way to a slow guitar melody. Lucas waited, his heart beating faster. Edward watched as the four young women chatted and sipped water. Maria stood close, watching Lucas's reactions. Straightened in his chair, anxious for the last guest. Through the arch of ivy, a young woman appeared. She walked steadily, her gaze straight ahead. In her hand, she held a single flower, bright sunflower, its petals shining like sunlight captured. As she neared the table, Anna, Sophie, Priya, and Daniela paused their conversation to watch her. The girl reached Lucas and smiled. The moment seemed to stretch. Then she placed the sunflower on the table in front of him and said softly, "I brought this for you." Her voice was calm, and her eyes met his without flicker of pity. In that instant, Lucas felt something shift inside him. A simple sunflower, no fanfare, no speech, just a sign that someone cared. Lucas picked up the flower and turned it gently. The petals felt soft. He looked at the young woman. She nodded, as if she understood exactly what he needed. Lucas felt relief, joy, and hope all at once. He motioned to her seat. "Please, sit down," he said, his voice firmer than before. The other women smiled, curious. Lucas realized this date might be the start of something real, something kind, honest, and true. He leaned forward in his wheelchair, forgetting the earlier nerves. The four girls watched quietly as this new guest took her seat. Maria nodded to Edward, who allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. The search for kindness had begun that evening. Lucas felt it in the sunflower, and he could feel it in the air around him. He was ready to see where this simple act of thoughtfulness would lead. Edward was a rich man. He owned several businesses, drove fancy cars, and lived in a big house on a quiet hill. People saw him as a strong, confident, and busy man. But there was one part of his life that meant more than all his money: his son, Lucas. Lucas was 22 years old. He had been in a wheelchair since the age of 7. When he was a child, a car accident had damaged his spine. Since then, he couldn't walk. First, it broke Edward's heart. But over the years, he had done everything to make Lucas feel strong, capable, and loved. Lucas was smart. He read many books, loved music, and enjoyed making others laugh. He had a gentle smile that could light up a room. But inside, he sometimes felt sad and left out. He had never been on a date. He had never held a girl's hand or had someone look at him like he was special. Edward noticed this. He would often see Lucas watching romantic movies alone in his room or smiling sadly at couples in the park. One evening, while Edward was reading the newspaper, Lucas rolled into the room quietly. He looked thoughtful. "Dad," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, son," Edward replied, folding the newspaper. "Do you think someone would ever love me?" "Really love me?" Lucas asked, his voice soft. Edward looked at him. His heart ached. He wanted to say yes, shout it out loud, but he also knew how people could be quick to judge, slow to understand. Lucas continued, "I mean girls. They always smile and talk nicely, but I can feel they don't see me like that. I'm just the guy in the wheelchair to them." Edward stood up and walked over. He knelt beside his son and held his hand. "Lucas," he said gently, "you have more heart, more wisdom, and more soul than most people I know. If someone can't see that, then they're not the one for you. But I promise one day someone will." Lucas smiled a little, but Edward could see it was a sad smile. That night, Edward sat alone in his office, thinking deeply. All the money in the world couldn't buy his son the simple joy of love. But maybe, just maybe, he could help create the chance for Lucas to feel seen, not for his wheelchair, but for who he really was. He made a few phone calls the next day. One of his close friends, Maria, ran a non-profit group that organized events for young adults with disabilities. Edward called her and asked for a private meeting. At the meeting, he explained everything. "I don't want this to be a big thing," he said. "Just something small, respectful, and quiet. A dinner, maybe 4 or 5 girls who are kind-hearted and open-minded. I want them to meet Lucas, not as a charity, but as a chance to know someone amazing." Maria listened carefully. She understood the heart behind the request. She agreed to help. They planned a small blind date evening. The girls would be told only that they were meeting a thoughtful, smart, and kind young man. Nothing about money, Nothing about disability. It's just an evening to talk, eat, and share stories. Edward wanted to be sure it was real. If someone truly connects with him, he told Maria, it will show. The date was set. It would take place at a small, elegant, garden restaurant. Only the 5 girls, Lucas, and a few helpers would be there. Edward would stay nearby, but let the evening unfold naturally. As the evening approached, Edward told Lucas he had arranged a dinner where he could meet some new people. Lucas looked unsure. Is this like some kind of setup, Dad? Edward smiled. No pressure. Just a dinner with 5 nice young ladies. You don't have to like anyone. Just enjoy the evening. See it as a chance to talk. Lucas nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. On the night of the dinner, Lucas took extra time getting ready. He wore a clean white shirt and light blue jacket. His caregiver helped him fix his hair. Edward watched from the doorway, feeling proud and nervous at the same time. He wheeled Lucas into the restaurant garden, which was decorated with soft lights, flowers, and quiet music. The tables were set, and the air smelled like fresh roses. One by one, the girls arrived. They were all polite and smiled warmly. Each took a seat and waited for the evening to begin. Lucas looked around nervously. The girls started talking to him, asking about his interests. He answered kindly, trying to be cheerful. But inside he could feel that something was missing. The conversations were nice, but shallow. No one seemed truly interested in him. They were just being polite. Then the last girl walked in. She had short brown hair, wore a simple dress, and held something in her hand. It was a bright yellow sunflower. She walked straight up to Lucas, smiled, and said, "Hi, I'm Emily. I brought this for you. I hope you like sunflowers." Stared at the flower, surprised. No one else had brought anything. The flower wasn't big or fancy, but it was thoughtful. It made him feel seen. "Thank you," he said, smiling more genuinely than he had all evening. "That's very kind of you." Emily sat down next to him and their conversation began. Easily, she asked real questions, not just "How are you?"
But what kind of music makes you feel happy?
And "Have you ever written something that made you proud?" Lucas found himself laughing, listening, sharing things he hadn't told anyone in a long time. From a quiet corner, Edward watched his son talking to Emily. There was a glow on Lucas's face, a mix of surprise, comfort, and joy. Edward's eyes grew misty. He whispered to himself, "One flower." That's all it took. The evening ended, but something had started. For Lucas, this was more than a blind date. It was a moment of hope, a sign that kindness still lived in the world. And for Edward, it was proof that even the richest man in the world couldn't give his son love, but he could open the door for it to walk in holding a sunflower. Would you like me to continue with part 2 next?